we'll begin recording. All right, everybody, welcome to the December 2022 FMDiSC meeting. I'm Barry Isaacson, your meeting shepherd. Today we have news and updates from LeCates at Claris about FileMaker and the Claris Platform. Then we'll have an update on engageu from Chris Moyer. And later on, we'll have a presentation on transitioning to UX design from Heather McCue. So, and we'll have some announcements and everything. So if anybody has anything they want to say during the announcements, you can put it in the chat and we'll get to that later. So with that, Andy, I think the floor is yours.
Ask everybody to mute.
Yes, everybody mute, please.
Right on. Thank you, Barry, and thank you everyone for having me. Yeah, I think the provenance for me coming in part was that I went to pause on error, and while I was there up in the mountains in North Georgia, I think was roughly around the time or just after FMDiSC did his October meeting. And so it wasn't until after that pause on error and maybe a week after when I was catching up in the office that I had a chance to watch the recording. And I thought the October meeting at FMDiSC was revelatory, right? I thought it was, that's what I would say. There's a lot of amazing feedback, a lot of amazing questions, and a lot of angst and a lot of issues that people were discussing in that meeting. And so, I kind of just want to recognize that the power of this particular group is really quite wonderful. Despite, as somebody who works for the vendor, watching a video about people like having a lot of fear, uncertainty, and doubt about the direction and what we're doing with the company and where our motivations are, I found it really, really informative, and became instantly a big promoter of folks around the company watching that video, all the way up to Brad and across departments, because I think it's important that we know what's going on and have a very open communication about these sorts of things. So I wanted a chance to just come back and chat and be a little bit unscripted. I know we've had a lot that's happened in the ensuing 2 months. So we can talk about some of the product goings on, and there was the event at engageu that Chris will talk about and more. But I just want to say thank you, right? That I thought that was an amazing conversation. There's a lot of the topics there that I'd love a chance to chat through with y'all. And be very open about if you're willing to do it. So hence I fashioned with Barry the notion of an Ask Me Anything, where really everything's on the table. You can't offend me. If I wasn't offended after watching that one, I can't be offended by much. So that partly is why I'm here. Of course, since then, we have launched FileMaker 19.6 with the long-awaited feature of transactions and a few other things. I believe that there's actually another updater coming, 19.6.2 for server, that if it's not in market yet will be presently, because there was a hanging bug in the JavaScript performance improvements that were in there. Sorry, for WebDirect. Sorry. So that's coming soon. But if we want to shout about 19.6 at all, I'm happy to do that. I don't know if the word's gotten to hear about that release yet. And then I think Robert and Brad went over to Malmö to the engageu event, and Robert opened the kimono quite widely to talk about the platform and where we're going with the Claris platform. And so I've watched the video from that a couple of times because we were privileged to receive it internally, and I'm happy to represent some of the vision around the Claris platform there, if that makes sense. So that's my offer, and I would love to know what you all might like to talk about today.
What about talking about, you mentioned the passage of time between October and now. What are the big new things you're seeing? I mean, some of us have downloaded freemium, some of us have not.
Awesome. I didn't know that any of us were downloading freemium yet. But yeah, one of the things in the product that you're hinting at that's coming very soon will be free access to the platform. I'm going to change the word from freemium to just free or free access right now, because freemium itself is a business model. It's a strategy. It's not a deliverable. One doesn't sell somebody freemium. What is that? But we will have free access to the Claris platform. It is coming soon. We're ramping it, and it's in the hands of some very early testers. I actually was yesterday signing up for it. I'm pleased to report that I was able to build myself a new account in under 2 minutes, like 1.5 minutes to get up and running on it. So, we're building those sorts of architectural things so the onboarding experience can be good. I don't expect it to be widely available before the holidays, and we really don't want to blast it out there. And then, Apple takes a holiday and we don't want to be around, or we don't want to be absent while people are getting in there and may want support and have questions and that sort of thing. So I think we'll start ramping up exposure to it after the new year. I don't know the exact timelines, and we'll probably be a little agile on that too, and ramp the exposure to a group that grows over time, but quickly. We want to get the platform into the hands of everybody. Our hypothesis is that a lot of the uncertainty around the Claris platform is simply lack of access, right? And so we want to make sure that anybody can get their hands on it and start playing with it and understanding the capabilities that are there. So,
Andy,
I have a question for Lynn. It was that the partner instance of Claris Platform, or was it freemium?
Don't know the answer to that question because
yeah,
I'm
that
not
was a good
100%
question. It could be the latter. Let me distinguish what freemium will mean for our customers, or what free access will mean for our customers from. There is a lot more access that we're trying to provide in advance of free access. So we know that we've got a community of many thousands of developers, but we know that there's a concentration of voices in this community that amplify, right? There's layers to the onion. And so we did offer our partner community access to the Claris platform as part of their, whatever their partner licensing scheme is, with an NFR sort of version of the Claris platform, so they can get in and start playing with it and more. We did get together with a cohort of community champions and advocates and trainers and folks that will ultimately be just naturally supportive in the way that this community is. And we wanted to give them early access to start getting their fingers in there and playing and learning, and then writing about it, as Beverly has graciously done, and David Head and a few others, right? But free access as actually part of our overall strategy to the market is a big deal, and that's what's coming. So it's not this sort of early gift that we've made to certain people to start playing, and it really is about being part of the overall product strategy. And so implicit in that free access is that we will at some point also have a tiered licensing model, kind of like we do with Connect today, where at a certain price point you get some capabilities, at another price point more, another price point more. And free will be the entry price point in that tiered model, right? We don't have that tiered model today. We don't. We have the programs right now where you can buy and add the Claris platform onto your FileMaker license, essentially. But we'll get free out before we have the tiered pricing, because we just feel it's important that everybody have a chance to play with this thing. So that's going to come in. When free access comes, it will have some limitations. But as Peter discussed, going all the way back to April when we first announced this, the point is to remove friction, to experience, learn, build value, and ultimately then adopt. And so we want to put as little hard limits as we can on there. We will have a limit in terms of users. So a developer can create, use, and build to their heart's content, share with one other person is the current thinking, so that they can sort of prove the utility of multiple people accessing the platform. And then when they're ready to, when they've created value and are ready to deploy and share more broadly, at that point, we feel it's time that it's a fair game to start asking for money, and we'll charge for it. Does that make sense? Okay. Part of the delivery in sort of a staged and growing fashion for free will also be to just understand what people need from that experience, right? We will have some limitations in the EULA around data volumes and transaction levels. Connect is Claris Pro, Claris Go, Claris Server, Connect, Claris Studio are all part of the equation. Claris Cloud is not for the free access, largely because of its cost footprint to run it and the way that we have to manage the accounts. But we believe you can get the full experience of the platform with the rest. And you'll have access to all those tools for 2 users, and then some transaction limits on, on connect, or, the amount of data that you're piping around, the amount of records will be in the EULA, but not specifically enforced, at least at the outset, because we don't know. We don't want to predict or limit you or any other developer that wants to get in there and play to get in there and learn what the product can do. So,
Andy, I have a question, I guess it's a technical question. One of the things that I found exciting was the introduction of another database engine, right? The Mongo database engine, and the way that just the fact that we can have something else besides Draco, which we all know has been around a long time and does not always perform the way we want it to when we're trying to do particularly complex things. But I can't remember if it was Peter or Robert's slides where they went over the platform and showed how a Claris Pro database would be able to not directly, but through ESS Plus, be able to link to a Mongo created. You have to create it, I guess, with Studio, but you could have a Mongo system there and then you use ESS Plus. Not having worked with ESS Plus yet, but knowing a bit about ESS from the past, right? The original ESS. That was somewhat cumbersome, and you had limits on things like how many records you could view at a time, and how it would prefetch records and things like that. And I'm just wondering what to expect along those lines. Like how much are we really going to be able to leverage in a traditional like Claris Pro designed system, which is really a FileMaker Pro design system? How much will we be able to leverage that Mongo database when we have situations where we just need that much faster performance?
Yeah, so great question. Where to start with that? So ESS Plus, I think Pete described that back in April when he was showing that we have a model for our platform that sort of allows us a way to hybridize and bring together the cloud scalable NoSQL data store that is Mongo, underneath Studio, and get it into a partnership with Draco in such a way that you can use that data to extend on your apps and make them more powerful and do new things. So that's a thing, but the difference with ESS Plus is that we own the entire pipeline, right? We're not just beholden to a driver and somebody else's database. So because of that, I almost have stopped thinking about it as ESS Plus, and where I think we're going with it, as much as we possibly can, to normalize that data pipeline so it feels like one thing, right? Now, it will be there are two things, right? And you're going to want to use, I think, the Studio data platform for what it's going to be best at, and that's largely going to be around availability and performance over the WAN, right? I mean, Draco was not built for that. Draco was built for a local area network. It's very chatty. We know all those things, right? So to your point about there are certain performance, equations we need to think about where it will make more sense. Interestingly enough, it's conceivable that there are going to even be some scenarios where having the data in a table in Studio could outperform what you could do with the local table, which is kind of interesting. I don't think we're there yet with the platform, but there's some interesting implications there in my mind. But I think what you'll find over time, Bob, is that we'll be able to, use with some facility what's up in Studio and build relationships on it and think of it as sort of full peer to the tables that are in Pro. And what we don't really have today is the ability for the Draco tables to be modeled into the Studio experience. I'll be curious to see where we go potentially there, because that could be meaningful. Robert Halsey, when he was in Sweden, did show off some things as well about the direction of the views and the componentry that is Studio in the context of a Claris Pro solution, and where a spreadsheet view, for instance, could participate as a layout in your Pro solution. Other views potentially could as well. And that to me starts to get more fascinating, because it's not only about harmonizing the data pipeline, but also harmonizing the product experience when I observed the meeting here from October, there were questions about, is Studio supposed to replace FileMaker? And the answer is no, no. Will Claris, the whole platform, replace FileMaker? Well, okay, now we're talking something different because Claris is FileMaker ++, right? It's FileMaker with extended by cloud technologies, and it is the natural successor to the FileMaker platform, right? I think Dave was suspicious that we might want to make that conversion as fast as we humanly can. It's not really about what we want. It's about what the market wants on that one, right? So we'll keep FileMaker in market as long as is necessary for our customers, because we know there's definite roadblocks right now in making the conversion. There are things that we don't have in Claris because of the swap to Claris ID and the way it's all modeled together. We don't have, external authentication. We don't have Claris Cloud yet. That's coming soon. But we've got a bunch of roadblocks that we know we need to tackle before we have enough parity where we can reasonably say that nobody's using FileMaker anymore someday. But we're in no hurry. But going back to it all, experientially, that discussion where we are thinking as a community about 3 products being Studio, Connect, and Pro, and we're doing these comparisons about Studio versus Pro, and it doesn't do much, or why would I want this thing? That's supposed to replace this one. It's not. We need to start thinking of them as one thing. And so I think there'll be a harmony that we progressively strive towards as well at the experience level. And in that case, going back to your original question, Bob, I think that the data pipeline itself needs to feel like one thing, right? And I can make decisions about how I use it, but it doesn't feel like 2 products that are struggling to integrate. It feels like one platform. So that's our goal long-term.
Thank you.
I have a question.
Please.
And it's picking up on, excuse me, some of the things you just said. When Peter first laid out the strategy, I guess back in April, excuse me, with, we keep FileMaker and then we extend it with Mongo and Studio and all of that, seemed to make a lot of sense because it let people sort of stay where they are and also explore this new area. And I think the reality that a lot of us have run into is that it's not. It's you're on the old platform or you're on the new platform. And there's been a lot of showstoppers, like you were just saying, that are stopping people from getting to the new platform. And as I was thinking about it, it seems one of the sort of the linchpin of those problems is requiring Claris ID. So it means that external authentication doesn't work. It means offline access doesn't work. And I understand from a business perspective why Claris ID makes sense for Claris as a company. But I guess I'm asking either from a technical perspective or from a developer's perspective, why is Claris ID advantageous to us at all? And it seems like instead it's brought a whole lot of problems and made this transition much harder. And if that was like sort of an original design decision, this new platform is going to use Claris ID and only Claris ID for authentication. It feels like that was a fundamental problem in this whole strategy. That it's
I will agree that the introduction of Claris ID into the equation is causing this friction right now to adoption. But it's not a business decision. It's a technical one, right? We need that identity to stitch together the various services that one has access to, and so it does create a different model there. But the roadblocks that are there around external authentication, we will solve for that, right? That's not far away. That's one of our highest priorities. I expect that to be solved relatively soon in the new year, once we get past the holiday. Getting our Claris ID act together in terms of, we've had Claris ID for FileMaker Cloud and we've had it for Connect. But we're advancing the capabilities of the Claris ID engine, if you will. And so we've had to sort of modernize those, make them all work together more better, right? There's foundational stuff that we've been we've been invested heavily in that haven't gotten us to the point of sort of feature understanding of what's going on, but the investments have been really big to prepare for what's happening and starting to happen now, where you're seeing capability and functional updates now releasing every 2 to 3 weeks, right? And so I think it was between May and September when I think I saw Chris Moyer, in a conversation on one of these forums talking about, oh my God, look at how fast this thing is moving, because it really is now, and it kind of changes the game. So I agree with you that Claris ID causes the transition, and it's why we keep FileMaker in market ultimately, but it's essential to the architecture of the Claris platform. I think ultimately it'll make things a lot easier. I mean, my sign up yesterday in less than 1 minute was easy peasy, and all of a sudden I'm in there and I'm running Studio, downloading Claris Pro, and it just all comes together in a much more harmonious fashion. So it'll be good for us, I believe.
Okay.
I believe as a developer, I should say.
I'm going to follow up on what Jonathan just said, is that a lot of what you're doing seems awfully ad hoc. I mean, it's to us on this end, and this is scaring the hell out of me because this is kind of how I develop, is we kind of, we have a general outline, but we don't have a lot of specifics, and we iterate and we iterate. And now I'm kind of feeling how my client must feel. And I'm understanding a lot of the pushback I get sometimes. But it does seem like you guys kind of have a general idea, but your specifics are a little bit loosey-goosey and ad hoc.
Well, I think it's not so much being ad hoc. I think it's trying to really avoid being super prescriptive about our sort of roadmap beyond a certain horizon, right? And really look for customer feedback. I think Robert tends to articulate this really, really well. And, I think we do have a vision for where things are going. I mean, we started with the idea of simple public forms, as an adjunct to your Claris Pro, apps, because we know that that's something that's difficult to do in the FileMaker, technical and licensing model, right? To go out to 1 million people and do a survey, you just can't do it. And so we wanted to do that. But of course, the forms that we put out, it was very much an MVL. It was very static. There wasn't a whole lot you could do with it. So, to compare it then with something like, I don't know, a Jot Forms or something like that, we needed to do things, but we got a lot of feedback from, customers and developers who picked it up through Problem Solver, Circle, and more, and are using it. And it's leading to things like the signature capture and the, there's now the ability to conditionally hide and show things and do branching in your forms workflows and things like that. And we'll continue to build those out to customer spec. So there's an element of, we know where we're going with that. And ultimately, it's not even just forms, it's customer portals, right? And a customer portal needs to be a dynamic experience. You need to be able to log in with your identity, not Claris ID, your identity in the context of my app. And you need to be able to get your records to see what you signed up for in your event registration or whatever the thing may be. It could be a school class trip, I don't know. And that those forms can be, dynamically modified based on your Claris Pro data or whatever, right? By calculations and programmability. And so those things are coming. We have those in vision. It's not that we're just loosey-goosey guessing and building a Winchester mystery house, rather the opposite, I hope. I heard somebody chime in there. I don't know if that was an interruption or a mute button issue, but there was another question. Hit me.
There's a question in the chat about free access for vertical market developers.
Mhm.
I think it's more about the licensing on eventually, how do we license that to end users?
Correct. Yeah, and this one is, we understand the problem and don't have the answer yet. We don't have the answer in market. And there's, I think, an additional problem, which isn't just the licensing per se, but also just the technicals. Right now, when you're in an organization, a Claris organization is when you have a Claris ID and you are the team owner, the administrator for your org, right? You can invite people to participate in your solution. And so your solution is attached to that org, right? So your Claris ID gets you access with whatever permissions you need. The methods and models we have to build, and we will, so that we can facilitate a marketplace where people can exchange, code and capabilities and solutions and apps, that's not there yet, right? But it's definitely on our radar, and we'll work toward that. So I don't have an answer, Rhett, to the question of how that's going to work. I can say that it's definitely in our backlog.
Andy, I have a question.
Sure.
As you were describing, we want it to be available, if you're doing a form, school trip, and I forget the other example. And I think that think that was me. I could have sworn I had muted myself at the beginning, but
No worries.
what I suggested in the background to myself really was a recipe box, which, you know, when you say school trip, I'm thinking like really small, like do it yourself things. And so my question really is, you know, what does this do for our corporate customers? What is that a target? Is that you didn't, you know, without, I mean, we are dealing with the license issue of well, you know, anonymous users don't have access or only have access to form views, or like, how does this all work into the corporate user?
For sure. Yeah, and probably I just chose a bad use case there, because I think when we start going to customer portals and more functionality like that, then clearly we're talking about broader, more complex business utility. One of I hear Robert talking about adding complexity to Studio, and what he means by that is adding capabilities that developers think are worthy, right? Like right now, we're early days, right? But we're only 6 months in, or whatever it is. We're a few months into the platform, and the pace is crazy. So we added to the platform a couple updates ago, probably a month ago or so, the conditional hiding or showing of something on a form, right? So I can put in, if I choose to go to, I don't know, I'm picking a meal at an event and I need a special diet, then I get a new form to do a picker for that. If I don't, then I don't. That kind of conditional visibility has programmability in it that currently is very no code. You say, you know, for this field with this condition, you know, if that's true, then take this field and reveal it or whatever, right? It's a very simple no code way to set up visibility. But interestingly enough, what's happening behind the scenes there, and that will reveal itself at some point in the not too distant future, is there's code. There's code being generated. And so, in fact, let me see if I can grab a slide that Robert put together. And then also, I want to come back to your question about who is our customer and who is our developer, Howard. That was Howard, right?
Yeah.
Thank
Sorry.
you, Howard. Okay, thank you. Sorry, man. All right, let me see if I can find this. And oh, now I'm going to have the hidden screen problem, aren't I? Can I share and run a keynote at the same time? Will that work?
You should be able to share.
Okay, let's try this. If I put this thing in play mode, I need the window thing to go away. All right, can you see something that says automation and calculations?
Yes.
Yes. So this is the action engine, as the engineers are calling it. And, you know, again, the idea is I can say when something happens, when a given field is not equal to, is greater than, whatever, some value that might be picked from a pop-up list, then do something, an action, like in this case, hiding a field. Well, which one then you choose? But, and so at the bottom is kind of a natural language way to express, you know, when a session is not equal to, in this case, it was Robert's demo, a pizza event, then hide a field for a signature. What's happening behind the scenes is that code is being generated. And this code is informed by, and kind of an evolution of calculations and scripts that we all know and have mastered over decades, right? But advanced to a place where it's true tech code, or text-based code with dot notation and more. And we'll have other capabilities like, you know, the auto completions and you know, syntax checking and things like that, right? So I guess where I'm going with this, I'll stop the share for a moment, is that we want to build in the complexity and the programmability that is worthy of our developers. One of the things I think, to your question, Howard, about you know, business level, is also like, who's our developer? One of the comments that stood out for me that I still remember from the October meeting, that I think was Lynn saying they're trying to get rid of us. Claris is trying to get rid of us, right? I'm full up, almost cried. I like broke my heart, because that's absolutely not our intention. We know the power of our developers and what Claris developers do. We solve hard problems that matter. We have available to us everything from no to low to pro code, and we extend this, you know, our platform with JavaScript, with, you know, add-ons, with the amount of capability in our developer community is huge. And so there's an assumption by many that the point of Studio is to go and chop off some area where we're going to build capabilities that go to a citizen developer only and is very no codey and thus lightweight. And why should any of us care about that, right? That's not it. Like, now, will that be a thing? Will it be easier and more approachable for that business developer? Yes, it should be. There is a future. Our focus right now, again, is this community of developers. Straight up, like, we want this tool set to work for you, to make sense for you, to extend on the capabilities you've already had with FileMaker, to be able to tackle new problems in new domains and simply just make us all more valuable, right? So that is our goal, and we're focused on. And so, to the question about being ad hoc, to what developers we focus on, we are focused on this developer community. We're focused on a vision where we can build complexity into this tool and do really cool stuff. And Howard, that should go to scale, and it should go to more robust use cases. The other slide that we've used, and here's a bit of a riff on it, I'll share again. Sorry, is this one, and I'll not do the build so I can, I think, see you. But this slide, is really representative of how we see the business value space of the Claris platform expanding. Now, there's a slight modification on this slide from prior public versions of it, and I know Dave watches for the details, and so here it is. There's an orange box on here now. There's a yellow box that says customer portals. The basic story is, we know that Claris developers solve hard problems that matter for their businesses. Robust, what we're calling operational apps, is typically it's about companies who want to operate uniquely. They don't want to operate the way their software wants them to operate. They want their software to support their custom operations. And so we've built up over the years robust operational apps in businesses, and we've made them so that they can integrate well with legacy systems and many other databases and more. We've, of course, added to the equation the ability to integrate, and Claris Connect is representative of that. The integration, we know, in the modern era is just fundamental. It's table stakes. You have got to be able to integrate with everything in the business tech stack, right? And so we're going to be heavily invested in that, and a lot of the data is coming in from cloud systems now, right? I use Slack at Apple. Apple uses Slack, right? That's part of our cloud tech stack, and I would love to be able to leverage that in my apps. Well, once I have the ability to integrate with legacy systems and cloud apps, and by the way, get data from anonymous users over the web who don't have to have an account with you or with Claris, then I have a potential to become, particularly for SMB, the data warehouse for the entire business, right? Like, get everything into this data pipeline, leveraging it in the Studio MongoDB or leveraging it in Draco as you feel appropriate. Once you have all your data collected, that's a lot of power and potential. So then our focus has been on the notion of feeding management with visibility on their business, so they can tune the business and innovate and align their teams to their decisions and innovation. So the notion of getting in business intelligence, lightweight BI. We're not entering the BI space, but to get in, the charting, the dashboarding, those capabilities that we started revealing in September. And now we're building out on project management capabilities, because we are using Jira at Claris. Why are we doing that, right? Like 15, 20 years ago, when I used to work with Chris, we used FileMaker to manage our projects, right? And we know lots of our developers and partners out there aren't using FileMaker to manage their projects anymore, right? Because there's other tools out there that have, I think, as Ernest Coe calls it, a firmer opinion on project management. Well, we're not going to become a project management platform per se, but we can put in the project management tooling so that we have a pretty strong opinion about it, and you can build custom project management. At Claris, we will eat our own dog food, and we will use this platform and replace Jira. 100%. That's going to happen. It's going to happen soon. So we want to build those capabilities for management apps, as we're calling them, that kind of leverage the robust operational apps we've got, the ability to consolidate all your data, and then give, particularly in SMB, really full view on the business and the ability to turn the levers and twist the knobs. One conversation that we've been having a lot, I know it came up in Malmö, I know it came up recently on a Claris Partner Council meeting, is that there is a lot of obvious value that partners and developers can sell into their businesses, particularly SMB, for customer portals, right? What business doesn't want to have a digital relationship with their customers every vendor I work with, I've got an app or I've got to sign into a website, right? Like there should be a customer portal facility that our developers can deliver. And so we will have more and more focus on that. It's a natural extension of what we've been doing with public forums and more. When you put all this together, we think that we, really offer, again, particularly for small to mid-market companies, the notion of an operating system or the ability to build an operating system. I think I mentioned this before when I came last time to FMDiSC. I believe Dave, brought up that, who is it, Dave? There's another company that sells on the notion of being your operating system. From India.
Yep.
I'm sorry, I'm losing my mind right now. But the difference is that they're selling you their operating system, right? We're selling you a platform to build your business operating system, right? I thought about it a lot after that meeting, Dave, and that is the difference. When we met with the CEOs and Brad did a webinar, I think it was late September. He met with the one guy who was from Moss. Dave, you were in the dang thing, right? I'm sorry, I forgot. When we did that webinar, the CEO of Moss, considers the FileMaker platform, the Claris platform, to be his business operating system. He builds the operating system for his business, and as he designs that operating system, he innovates his business. So we think there's a lot of utility to expand the thinking on how our platform can address really big problems for businesses everywhere. And I don't mean to class out enterprise on this, because we believe in enterprise customers as well. And we know we have tremendous utility, departmentally speaking and whatnot, to do more and more there, particularly with some of the things we're doing at the cloud scale end of things. So that was a lot of talking. I apologize. I went long on that, but is that any questions on that or that notion of Zoho? Thank you. Speaking of competitors, did anybody see the news on Airtable today? I'm not saying this to gloat. I currently have a job opening, a job rec that I'm hiring for, and I've been interviewing. And recently I've been getting inundated with candidates from Meta and Twitter and other places. And so I never gloat when people are losing their livelihoods. But this morning, I think if you Google it on TechCrunch, Airtable's laying off 250 people and 3 of their execs left. Like their head of sales, their head of HR, and their head of product all left, along with about 25% of their workforce. So there's some changes going on there. And that's not picking on Airtable. There's some other low-code companies that are similarly adjusting to current market conditions. I think with the challenging market conditions that are out there right now, we're probably going to see a lot of consolidation. There's been such an expansion in low code and low code competitors. We may be entering a phase where there will be more consolidation now to get to the things that we already have. We're somewhat insulated from this because we have a 30-year track record. We got a developer base like y'all. We have a customer base that is the envy of everybody in our industry. So we're doing okay, by the way. But there's going to be some struggles out there in this space, and just kind of interesting to watch it. What other questions we got?
Andy, I want to turn this into a discussion of Claris Platform, FileMaker Platform security, but I want to back up a minute to the business about the Claris ID and the external authentication. It's not just external authentication that's needed. It's the ability to use the OAuth 2 OIDC construct so that we don't have issues such as we have with Amazon and Google trying to do external authentication. We need to be able to create groups. We need to be able to support second factor. And as passwords are starting to go away with the FIDO initiative with Apple, Microsoft, Google, and as of yesterday, Android. I hope that the product managers and the engineering teams will keep this in mind, and that we will get the maximum amount of flexibility so that we can not be constrained by the peculiarities of fill in the blank Claris ID or Google or Amazon.
No, good call, Stephen. And, I think Claris ID is also early days. I mean, right now you have to manage accounts individually, and no organization at scale is going to want to do that. We know that to be true. Just as a teaser, this was one of Robert's other slides going to views in the product, right? And some of what we're trying to do in views. And I'll talk about that in a minute, but if you look really closely, and if you played with Studio, there's something here that isn't in Studio today over here, Stephen. So the notion of group management in this platform in Studio that can harmonize with group management and structuring the Claris Pro, tool set as well, is I think on the roadmap, or on the backlog, I guess is how we should term it. And then making that work as it needs to by modern security expectations, I think we'll get there.
Well, it's very good to know. And we're coming up on such a period of change in the next year about how authentication assertions are to be verified. Very good.
Yeah,
very good.
For sure. And, it's interesting. I think the security, what do I want to call it, profile. I'm thinking about the session we did last year, Chris, talking about the threat landscape, and then, the shared responsibility notion. We believe that for particularly our smaller customers, that it is harder and harder to secure against the threat landscape that's out there when you're doing it yourself, right? And so the advent of more cloud technologies that we can provide, where we can supply the DevOps and the SecOps and the cloud ops to stay on top of things with a audited process that is reasonably trustworthy. I believe we've recently actually had some pen tests that I hope we can publicize a little more. I think they're the first penetration tests that Apple has ever admitted to publicly, but they're for our platform. And we're going to be investing a lot in security, so that in terms of shared responsibility, what we can do on the cloud to assure our customers that we're taking care of things well, we're going to do. That's absolutely critical. So, while I've got this screen up, because I love Robert's slides, this is another view that I think is on the horizon. And the messaging here, as we think about the capabilities that Studio could add to a Claris Pro app, or to the developer's arsenal, is that Robert's thinking a lot about what he calls table stakes, and thinking about scenarios where developers are in an organization and are asked to solve a problem. And today with FileMaker, some of the problems, you kind of have to go digging around in, or you go to Marketplace, you find tools somewhere, or you stitch from old code to try and represent that, I can do a Gantt chart, right? But with Studio, there's a significant number of these views that we can make happen and make them really quality, but maybe not for the purpose of your ultimate solution, right? We still have add-ons, and we still have JavaScript extensibility in Claris Pro. But when you're trying to put together a proof of concept and figure out whether you can build to somebody's expectations, we can put a lot of power in here with sort of center of the road, I don't know what to call it, sort of table stakes views that could complement what you can traditionally do in FileMaker, in the FileMaker toolset, or Claris Pro. And if that's the case, it also suggests that eventually our vision for this is that we would open this up too, right? And what I mean by that is, if you think about how we've made the FileMaker platform extensible through JavaScript and add-ons, you think about what we're doing right now. I don't know if this is public. I think we've talked about it, but the connector kit, or the ability to build your own connectors for Connect, is happening now. We're under ETS as of a couple of days ago, and at least one developer has already sent me screenshots of integrating with OpenAI and doing some new things there, right? In fact, I can show it here. But Connector Kit is coming, giving us the extensibility so that we can handle the sort of high volume connectors that are required for Connect, but then where the long tail happens, and we'll never be able to justify building out a connector for some maybe obscure platform that a small community of our developers would ever care about, they can solve for it, right? Exchange value with each other. And I think the same thing ultimately happens to Studio, right? Where this becomes extensible. I think Todd, when he was here in October, was talking about the need for that. We understand the need for that, for sure. I'm going to keep steering with Robert's slides because they're good. this is an example of what I was chatting about before in bringing Studio and Pro together, where in this case, it is a Studio view or a spreadsheet view, but it's in Pro, right? And it's basically it is acting as a layout, if you will, in Pro with all the capabilities that are in Studio, but the capabilities that are relevant. Like there's a number of controls that matter in the browser would have no relevance in Pro. And so those controls go away. And furthermore, I think I heard Robert say when he was in Malmö that the Studio view, when it goes into Pro, should respect the Pro themes and styles. So it will look like part of your app and not feel like something kind of out of left field, right? So this is where things start getting exciting for me when I think about those themes and having Kanbans that are super responsive and Gantt charts, and I can put those together inside of the context of a Pro app experience and have them work together because the data is on my graph from Studio. I mean, it starts to come together as just a supercharged FileMaker development experience. To custom connectors, since I was just talking about it, this is essentially available now. The ability to go in, and we've added an area in Connect where you can type code. It's JSON, right? You're filling out essentially a descriptor for a connector. And then once you're done doing that, skipping ahead here a little bit, that connector gets added to your Connect experience. So it's in there and ready to go. Now, what won't be there at initial release, again, because we're trying to be agile, we want to get this out and get it into people's hands, is a facility to say, package that up as a bundle that you can distribute through Marketplace or something. However, it's just text. Like you can easily share this with other people, build a custom connector, and collaborate with other developers to make that happen, right? This is just a sweet little graphic. I think many of you know Ronnie Rios on the right there, who was on my team for many, many years, is a good friend. But this is Ronnie creating the first custom connector that was ever built outside of our core engineering team. And he's thrilled to be that guy. So good times. Yeah, if I put together some of the things that I'm showing from Robert's slides and some of the dialogue, we are fully focused on Claris developers, right? We're not trying to go out and build something to be an Airtable competitor for citizen developers. It will have utility for that in the future. It will help us get new customers into the ecosystem, no doubt. But we want our developers to have more impact potential in their organizations, right? And Studio can solve simple problems really quick, gum in your shoe sort of things that you want to get done really quick. Faster, so you can focus on bigger problems. That's not necessarily a bad thing. And then as its feature set improves over time, get on the train because it's moving fast. You can help steer us on where that feature set goes. That we'll have more big impactful projects with it as well. And then Robert has been talking this up a lot as well. I think there's a feeling that there was an era when I first started using FileMaker back in the 90s where it was really more of a productivity platform than anything else, but everybody was using it, right? So in your organization, you would share with other people and everybody's using FileMaker and you would collaborate and that was great. As we become very much a powerful developer-centric platform over the years, now that it starts to feel lonely to be the developer sometimes. You build apps that other people use, but they're not necessarily contributing in the same way. You're not having the same dialogue on how you innovate with the platform. And so we think there's a chance here where with the Claris platform, where Studio is more approachable to a business developer, to a data analyst who may not be a full-on coder the way a Claris developer is, that you can have more allies in your organization for the apps that you're deploying and their usage, right? You can include them in the development of, views and spreadsheets and things like that, and working with the data, building dashboards, leveraging those. Your CEO now could be on the golf course looking at a dashboard on their phone that, before would be harder to get to. So the notion that you sort of have more champions, more of a cohort of folks that appreciate the platform and understand it, and we're tackling problems that it just doesn't make sense to go buy other platforms. Claris does not want to pay for Jira. It doesn't make sense for us to do that. We'd rather not be using, Typeform or, some of the form tools if Studio can do it just as well. And so, being able to keep some of the problems that are naturally part of the platform in the platform, we think would be great. And then this thing is moving fast. So, one of the observations I guess I made after the October meeting is that, there's a lot of looking at the platform in its current manifestation and saying, really, that's it, but that's not it. There is a vision to your earlier question, Lynn, and we're going there, right? But if you get on the board with us and you're playing with it and you're giving us the feedback, we're going to be advancing in the right direction. So we need your help. So there's a bit of an advocacy I'd make that when this thing is out and it's available and you can get on it for free, please join us, because this is going to be fun. It reminds me an awful lot as I'm starting to play with it of the early days of FileMaker, when I was on that machine right there, right? And we were sharing tips and tricks and figuring out how to sort and stack and push and pop things out of repeating fields. Repeating fields. I need to make a note. We need to put that in the product. I see some questions have lined up. Is there anyone that we should tackle first?
Well, I saw somebody needed a direction on where runtimes might go.
I would, yeah. So what is the nature of the question? Help me understand it.
Maybe are they going to exist?
Yeah, I think that there is, I'm seeing a couple questions here. One is, it's just portability, right? How do I take a solution that I built that is a Claris solution that, brings together Pro Studio and Connect? That's a little harder than just sending a binary file, right? That has been the Claris Pro file. And so we got some figuring out to do there, but that's definitely, Robert was talking about this in Sweden a little bit. That's definitely on our radar. So we don't have that yet, but we are thinking about how we facilitate that portability. And once we do, it leads to the bigger questions that go, the earlier question about, distribution of value from what is currently our solution bundle agreement, network of partners, and how do we facilitate a marketplace for exchange of apps as well as just componentry, right? So on our radar, but not there yet.
Andy, Jeremy's got a question for you.
Yeah. Hey, Andy. So I'm a contractor for a lot of different people. People hire me to do little things. How does it work with my Claris ID doing some random clients work if they're in Claris Pro? Do they lose a whole license because they have to add me temporarily? How does that work?
Right now, I believe that would be the case. But Robert was also speaking to this one. And there's also the complexity that can ensue if you are invited to 50 teams, right? And we now have a pop-up list that allows you to select which team that you want to currently work with, right? That'll put you in the right instance so that you're working on the right files in the right studio instance. And so expect some advancement there. There was a notion, I think, of a developer portal to help organize that a little better. But we're thinking about it, Jeremy. Don't have an answer for you right now. Today, you would be participant in whatever your customer's org licensing is.
Hey, Andy, Joel Stoner. I was the one that asked a question about the runtime in terms of, distributing a demo of a single user app. Is that, can we think of the free version as a replacement to the runtime in that context?
So it could be, right? The intention for free, its highest priority intention right now is for a developer to get in and play with the tool set and build and realize value and then say, okay, I'm ready. I need this and I'm going to pay for it. But we also look at it as a go-to-market lever. When content creators, when product creators are building stuff, you have an assurance that your audience can use it, right? It's free. They don't have to own the FileMaker software, have a license to it or whatever. And so there is something there. But like I said, today, I don't think you can transfer a solution from one org to another. And so we need to build the facility to do that so that you could, but it's on our radar. And thank you for the question.
Thanks for answering.
Andy, getting back to you mentioned NFRs at the very beginning, and I'm an SBA member, and I have yet to see a link or anything or a download for an NFR.
I don't know why that would be. I would say if you reach out to your partner manager, they can probably hook you up. If you want to play with it over the holidays, that might get you there. If you can wait till a little bit after the first of the year, I think we'll be ramping up soon, starting in January on the free access as well. But if you work with Tyler or Marie or something like that, reach out to them and see what we can do. Any news for FileMaker 19.7 already, Christian? We just launched 6, man. I think there is I think I mentioned there's a 19.6.2 that's imminently releasing, if it didn't already, for server, not for the rest of the products, just because of a bug that we found out late. And no, I don't have any news for FileMaker 19.7 yet. And that's not hiding anything, I just don't know. You're ahead of all of us. That's what's up. Chris Moyer, am I stealing your thunder when I keep mentioning Sweden? I'm sure you have much more detail than I do.
No, you're good. I mean, I was just going to do a quick recap for a few minutes, so no sweat.
Right on, mate. I wish I could have been there. And I would advocate for everyone here, if the videos do become public and you have a chance to watch them, the ones I saw, I thought were really, really strong. Let me offer this too. I know I'm doing a very, very poor facsimile of Robert by borrowing his slides and kind of stepping all over them. He tells the story very elegantly. I'd offer to have him back and do a demonstration for y'all after the turn of the year, if you want to do that. I know he'd be happy to do it.
Yep, Jonathan, that's for you.
Yeah, he presented it at the Chicago group using these slides, and you did pretty well, Andy.
He did okay?
No, you did. You did.
Oh, I
I
did?
mean, you meant what he said pretty well.
Thank you. I'm sure he'll watch this video as well, and then I'll be really embarrassed. All right. Anything else? We're almost at time, I think. Is that right, Barry?
Yeah, you got about 3 minutes. Anybody have any more questions for Andy?
I just say thanks. I appreciate the chance to come back and be with y'all. I have been stalking, not lurking, because I haven't been coming to the meetings, but I watch the videos, and the content has been great. One observation, I think, from last month, I believe Wim was doing a demo, and he showed what he perceived to be a security issue with studio data being widely available to a team member who had, I think, Claris Pro. I believe he was either exhibiting a bug or he had a Claris profile that was created by a team leader, team manager, which does have access to all the tables. But I escalated that into engineering, and they're looking into it and actually talking to him to make sure that we've got that figured out right. But I don't think it's quite the security hole that it appeared to be in the demo, and we'll get that clarified as soon as we can.
Bob, did you have a question for Andy?
Just a comment, really. Andy, earlier you were talking about Claris being somewhat insulated against the kind of churn that's going on in the low code market in general. And things like what Airtable is going through, whatever that is, and so forth. And I just think that's a really good point. That one didn't slip by me, because it's by having the user base that you have and everything that you mentioned, that really does put you in a really good position. That puts Claris in a really good position overall in this very rapidly expanding market. And I think that's a good one for us all to keep in mind as we're promoting the product, talking to new customers, and so forth. So thank you for that little bit of extra information that we can use.
Yeah, I mean, we're doing good. It's a tough market out there right now. Inflation is real. What SMB and particularly small businesses have had to go through over the last couple of years has been crazy. And so, it's going to be tough for all companies. But I think we're in a solid place. There's advantages to having been around for 30 years and built up the momentum and the flywheel that we have with our customers. And it shouldn't dismiss as well. We didn't really talk about it, but the advantage of being part of Apple. I know we've talked before here and in many forums about the strategic programs we're doing right now in education with Apple School Manager, but that's paying off. Like we're getting introduced to literally hundreds and potentially tens of thousands of new customers through that program, where Apple becomes a real lever for us in go-to-market strategy, selling on our behalf, essentially. And if we can capitalize on that and extend it to Apple Business Essentials, where then we're targeting the Fortune 5 million with our parent company pushing us, I mean, then we're really talking about growing the customer market. So we can focus very much on building our developer marketplace to satisfy for that. So we're feeling pretty bullish on the opportunities that we've got. And yeah, it's been a crazy couple of years, but we're confident where we're going. So thank you, man.
Okay, with that, thank you, Andy. That unless you have something else you want to.
Just one quick one, because Doug put the comment about pushing for a free version for computer science students for years. Yeah, we know that y'all have been asking for give us free access or make this happen, and it's always been either just really hard or we haven't been courageous enough to do it. It's a big bet for us to put free Claris out there the way we're going to do, but we believe that it just changes everything. It's not just for y'all to test and learn the thing. It just changes our entire go-to-market. Content creators should know that their audience can access the tool set. We can get into schools at younger ages. My daughter learned to program Java in early high school. Like we could easily get our platform places like Apple has anyone can code, right? We could do anyone can Claris and get that into schools potentially. And it will open up doors, of course, as an on-ramp for new customers when we feel the product is at a really good place for that. So we're really excited for it. It's a little scary, a little exciting, and let's go make it happen together. So thanks again, guys. Appreciate your time. I've now gone over by a minute. So thank you, Barry.
Okay. Thanks, Andy. Really appreciate you coming back to talk to us. Up next, we have Chris Moyer, who's going to update us on engageu. Chris, the floor is yours.
All right. Can you guys see my screen?
Yes.
Yes.
Awesome. Okay, so engageu is in Malmö, Sweden, right across the channel from Copenhagen. This took place November 13th through 15th. The 13th was just sort of a partner day. And then the actual conference proper was the 14th and 15th. And so it was a really great vibe. I think the Europeans in general have sort of felt neglected. They're always the last data center to be brought online. Early on in the days of DevCon, the Europeans tended to get fewer presentation slots. And so I think they really, really appreciated getting a pretty strong showing from Claris. Brad was there, Julie was there, Robert Holsey was there. And for those of you who appreciate the open book that has been Clay Mackle over the years, where he'll just tell you everything. I mean, Robert Holsey has taken over that mantle. You could ask him anything and say, we'd love to see this. And the guy is game for it. So that was really appreciated as well. People were like, wouldn't this be cool? He's like, yeah, it would be. We got to juggle priorities, but he's up for it. So if he thinks it's going to be a winner, he's in. So it's really nice to, Andy alluded to the open kimono aspect of the discussions, and it really was like that. It was a total free for all, and everybody was digging it. So this was hosted by Square Moon and ClickWorks. I don't know if you guys know the Square Moon guys. Joris presented that he was doing a robotic AI thing with FileMaker some years back, and so both these groups are longtime champions of the platform, have been around forever. And Claris was a co-sponsor as well, and I think they mentioned that the sponsorship by Claris enabled all these sessions to be recorded, and so that was really appreciated. Let's see, the pre-conference was Julie, Brad, and Robert. It was an NDA session. There was some prepared remarks and a demo and Q&A. And as I mentioned, it was a free-for-all, and nothing was, I think in the past, people have sort of gotten the vibe off Claris, like, we'll take that under advisement and, it disappears down a black hole. But there was very candid discussion about what's possible, what's not, and what the reasoning is behind it and stuff like that. And so I don't think anybody felt shut down on any points that they raised. And so it was a love-in. The conference thing itself, I mean, it was like right out of a medieval thing. And I think it was a medieval thing, actually. This is like a 600-year-old venue. Brad got up and said, I don't think I've ever presented in a venue that is more than twice as old as my homeland. And so It's almost like a little village set up here. So this is the kind of overhead view here, and this portal here is this little building here. So you can come tooling through here, and there's like open seating here. And then this was one of the conference buildings. The second and third floor had stuff. And this was sort of the main conference area where the keynotes were and stuff like that. And so this main presentation room here would seat probably, I don't know, 120 people or so, and there's a lot of standing room. And then these were smaller breakout rooms with a large sort of mingle and eat and drink coffee area as well. So that's what it sort of felt like. It was very atypical for those of us who are used to like hanging out in Marriott ballrooms and stuff like that. This was not like that at all. There were 140 people there, 20 different countries, 33 sessions, 30 presenters, 3 tracks. And so it was nice. I really appreciate 3 tracks. You know, that it's a double-edged sword, right? On the one hand, if you're not interested in a session, you have a couple options. But if you're interested in multiple sessions at a single time slot, then, you know, you got to wait for the video. And so fortunately, everything was recorded and you could wait for the video. But, you know, with 20 different countries represented, you can imagine that the concerns or issues raised and stuff like that ran a wide gamut of stuff. And so I think it was great for Brad and Robert to sort of hear the concerns of at least the European wider world. It's sort of a different take than we have here in North America. This is the agenda. There were 2 days of sessions here. The ones I've highlighted in gray are the ones that I actually saw, so I can't really speak to some of the other ones, but I wanted to just sort of show this to give you guys an idea of the stuff that was there. And actually, I forgot to highlight the keynote. So the keynote was Brad and Robert. Brad mostly just spoke. He had some slides just sort of talking about, you know, where Claris's head is at. And then Robert was obviously much more focused on studio. I thought all the presenters were great, super technical people. I've always thought, you know, Heidi Porter and I like to go to the .fmp conference in Berlin every year. And it's like a room full of Wim de Courts, you know, everyone's like super technical and really going deep on stuff like that. And you're like, wow, you know, I never imagined I would ever attempt to do something like that. I think it's cool that you've done it. I probably will never do it or want to, but it's just amazing the depth of technical experimentation I see over there. It's crazy. So this was a good one. There was a panel discussion at the end of the first day. So this was moderated by Matt Navarre. And the setup was he had Fabrice Nordman, who is one more thing in FMP hosting guy over there. They do the Docker hosting of FileMaker. And I was in there as well. And then they had Robert Holsey, and sort of the conceit was that Fabrice or I would bitch about something, and then Robert would do a counterpoint and say, well, here's how we have to do that. And everything we came up with, he's like, I totally agree. We should do that, or we should have this. And so it was totally non-confrontational, and we were all in the same boat, and we're all rowing in the same direction. So it was an interesting outcome, given how the thing was sort of designed and set up to, you know, how it played out. And so, and then everybody just, you know, because we were butchering some holy cows there. You know, one of the issues that was raised was, you know, we don't think Claris has done a great job of communicating and being transparent. And we raise issues and they disappear into a black hole. And Robert's like, absolutely, I hate that. And everyone's like, wow. And so as soon as that kind of spell was broken of, you know, trying to be polite and deferential and stuff like that, the stuff just started flying. And it was just a great, very candid discussion. And so when the videos do come out, I strongly recommend watching that, because that was an interesting one to sort of watch the dynamic shift in real time. Let's see. Oh, the studio technical session. So this middle time slot here was just Robert Holsey with studio. And interestingly, you know, he wasn't confident. You know, we were in Sweden, right? And the only data center currently up and running was on the other side of the world. And so he wasn't confident that he would be able to do that presentation without having some sort of technical issue. So he and his team had rigged up a version of Studio running locally on his laptop, which was interesting to see. So now we all know that's not just theoretically possible, but possible. And so that notion that, wouldn't it be great if you could use Studio offline and then sort of sync it or upload it at some point, made everybody's hamster wheels in their heads start turning. So that was an interesting, just sort of point to note. Let's see, day 2, Ian Jemison did a thing on open APIs, which is really interesting. It's not something, the less I have to do with APIs, the better I like it, because they're kind of dry and boring and a bunch of different nuances to the different ones. And he actually put the open API standard up against the Claris APIs, and one of them conforms to it and one of them doesn't. And it's really interesting how if you use the open API, that you sort of get documentation and testing capabilities right out of the bag. And so that was super interesting. Even if you're not a big API fan, I would strongly recommend the recording of that session. And then Ian also did the message queue one at the Auto Enter session last summer. Corin Walker unveiled a queuing system that he had built in FileMaker. And Ian was like, why reinvent the wheel? There's simple queuing systems that you can get right out of AWS. If you want to communicate between modules or between applications, just throw it up into Amazon's queue. And so he has pushing and consuming of queues that he's cooked up with Amazon. So for anybody who has to interoperate with other types of software and doesn't want to use an API and doesn't want to use ODBC and doesn't want to use some of those other connection technologies, but would actually like to use high-speed queuing and publish and subscribe and all that kind of stuff. That was super interesting to kind of see this Frankenstein, FileMaker AWS hybrid that was interesting stuff. So I don't have a whole lot to add. The slide decks, I believe, might be downloadable now. The videos, I just checked right before we started the session today here, and I don't see the videos up yet. And Andy, maybe you know more about the availability. I think Claris has possession of the videos, so I don't know if those are going to be published in a certain place or if you guys want to put them on the Claris website or how that's going to work. But
as far as I'm aware, Chris, we've only received the 3 that our teams participated in, and that was largely so internally we could socialize them. So I don't know if there's an intention or an expectation for Claris to do it. If there is, I'll chase it down.
Yeah, I'm not sure about that myself, but anyway, this was a love-in, and even the Claris folks were like, God, it's so great to be in person again. I'm so sick of Zoom meetings. And so it was a breath of fresh air for everybody involved. And I think the experience was so positive that I would certainly expect Claris to be doing in-person conferences again come 2023. So Andy, you can thumbs up or thumbs down that, but that was certainly my takeaway from the reaction to that.
Yeah, no specific announcement of an event, but getting back in person, yeah, it needs to happen. We're all aligned.
All right, so that's all I got. I just wanted to give a real quick field report, but it was a great conference, tons of people, great give and take, and positive reception to all the communications that were going on there.
Hey, great. Thanks, Chris. That was very informative. It is time for breakout rooms, so I'm going to pause recording here. Hey, welcome back from the breakout. Now we're going to have news and announcements. If anybody has anything in particular they'd like to say, try using the raised hand feature in Zoom to let us know you want to say something. If you're a new user or a new participant here, you can put your email address and name in the chat and we'll add you to our group mailing list. With that, Jonathan, do you have anything you want to say about the next meeting?
Hold on, need to unmute. No, obviously we're always looking for presenters. So if you're interested in presenting, whether in in January or following month, send an email. We'll put the email address for the board in the chat. And it could be as short as a 10-minute thing. Here's an interesting thing I came across, all the way up to a longer presentation. So always feel free to reach out if you have something you'd like to share with the group.
Okay, anybody else have any other announcements they'd like to make? Pearls of wisdom, Christian.
Yeah, I might point to the 3 conferences planned already for next year, and which are all English. So you can go to .fmp in Berlin, Pause on Error in the USA, and the Rome FileMaker Week is also with a lot of English. As I do simultaneous translation, so if there's a speaker in Italian, you would hear it in English on your speaker. And if someone presents in English, you would hear it in Italian on the speaker if you want.
Cool.
So if anyone wants to make a plan to travel to Europe, you can consider the conference in Berlin or in Rome.
One quick one, just as you may all recall, we announced last month that Barry, who is hosting this month's meeting, is retiring from the board, and so this is his last meeting. So just wanted to say thanks once again, Barry, for all the hard work that you've done along the way for FMDiSC, and congratulations on surviving being on the FMDiSC board. And I know that this isn't goodbye to everyone. It's just you're just leaving the board, and you'll still be around. So we all still get to enjoy your company. So that's a good thing too.
Great, thanks. I appreciate that. Any other announcements before we move on with Heather's presentation? Nobody? Heather, are you ready to go?
I am ready.
Okay, well, welcome to FMDiSC. I think you're a newbie here, right? This is your first time?
I am. It is the first time.
Okay, well, the floor is yours.
All right, let me share my screen here. Let's get going. Okay, can everyone see the screen with nothing on it? Let's see.
Yep.
Yes.
Yes, we can see.
All right, so you're not looking at speaker notes, you're actually seeing the presentation, right? That's always an issue for me.
Yes.
Okay, great.
Yes.
All right, well, it's great to see you all. Some I haven't seen in person for, I don't know how many years it's been now, but it's great. And I'm real excited to be giving this presentation to FMDiSC because my hometown is Fullerton, California. So I am Southern California born and raised. So I've moved to North Carolina and Texas over the last several years, but my heart is still at Newport Beach. Anyway, so I'm going to talk today about transitioning to UX design and how that will represent a mindset shift for some FileMaker developers. And so when you see a mindset shift icon, that's when we're talking about something that I think may require some effort and thought, intentional thought. So here we go. So I am Heather McCue with Harmonic Software Production Studios in Dallas. I am currently in one of our studios here. We call this one the podcast room, though we don't actually do podcasts. So anyway, this is where I've been the lead developer, or was the lead developer, for 16 years before taking on the role of the design and documentation team expert. In addition to my 3+ decades of FileMaker experience, I recently received my UX certification from SMU, where as part of the user experience design program, I participated in numerous immersive exercises. So I'd like to start you off with a brief exercise. Now, this is meant to be very quick, just 20 seconds. And to prepare, you'll need a writing surface and your choice of writing instrument, pen, pencil, marker, perhaps a crayon. So is everyone ready? Okay, I'm going to assume everyone is ready. During the next 20 seconds, I want you to draw a chair starting now. Okay, time's up. Everyone show us your chairs. Just hold them up and see that. Yep. I can see. Yep. Any more? Okay, good. Excellent. Okay. Now, something like a chair should have been simple. I mean, we all know and understand what a chair is, right? And yet you didn't all draw exactly the same thing. It's very interesting. So let's try something different. Again, with 20 seconds on the clock. See here. Is everyone ready? Okay, now during this next 20 seconds, I'd like you to draw a tree with a swing, starting now. Okay, time's up. Now, everyone hold up your drawings of trees with swings. Nice. Very creative. Okay. I like the detail on the tree, Dina. Is it Dina or Dinah? Got it. Okay. Dina. I like that. Dina, thank you. I like that. Okay, so tell me, why do you think that your chairs and tree with a swing ideas were different? To help answer this question, it's a rhetorical question, really, I'm going to share a related case study. We call this Project Tree with Swing. Now, this is how the customer described it. This is how the project leader understood it. This is how the analyst designed it. This is how the programmer wrote it. This is how the business consultant described it. This is what marketing advertised. This is how the project was documented. How it performed under load. That's my favorite. This is what operations installed. This is how the customer was billed. This is how it was supported. And in the end, this is what the customer really needed. Now, whether as a developer or a customer, I think we can all relate to aspects of this experience. Now, you may be wondering what this has to do with UX. So before I can explain that, I'll need to make sure we're all on the same page about a few things. So what is UX? Please share with me what, in your opinion, is design. Does anyone have any ideas? Remember to unmute. No takers?
Making things that are functional and easy to use and
okay.
Documenting.
Good, I like that. So according to noted expert Peter Denning, design is, quote, a process where we create and shape artifacts that solve problems, end quote. Or put more simply, to design is to solve problems. So it would follow that if design solves problems, that design thinking is, as Tim Brown, executive chair of IDEO, put it, a way of thinking that improves problem solving. Brown also describes it as a process steeped in empathy for the end users that strives for system level change and is based on rapid iteration and prototyping. Human-centered design is a term that generally encompasses all approaches to design that place the end user at the core of functionality. So our products, services, and experiences should be designed to reflect the needs of the users. So what is UX design? It refers simply and literally to designing the user experience, or referred to as a human-centered approach. But I prefer the more poetic definition put forth by one of my UX professors, which is UX is a human need, well-defined and elegantly met. Unfortunately, that quote is not on your screen, but UX is a human need, well-defined and elegantly met. And when you hear the terms UX, design thinking, human-centered design, you're basically more or less talking about the same thing. So why should you care? I mean, let's face it, whether a customer asked accurately or sufficiently for what they actually needed or not, unhappy users eventually equal unhappy customers. So it should come as no surprise that UX leading companies, oops, let me go back, that UX leading companies also lead in their industries, and the Fortune 100, and they're among the most trusted by customers. In fact, FYI, Apple, Amazon, and Google are considered the quote unquote holy trinity of UX. Let me get through that real quick here. Move on. Good. Okay, so how exactly is UX different from UI? There's a lot of confusion on that. So this is UI. Looking at the cute mobile, and this is UX. It's all about the actual user's experience. Okay.
Fantastic.
Yeah, that one. I like that one too. But I mean, that was cute, but here's perhaps a more relatable real world example. And truth be told, both of these are actually UI examples, each with their own user experience. So the glass bottle was pretty, but terrible at delivering ketchup, while the plastic one, the result of user observation, delivers ketchup like a charm. And I heard a tidbit the other day, I don't know if it's true or not, but there were some like 2 years of testing that went into creating that lid on that plastic bottle for the ketchup so that it doesn't let stuff out when it shouldn't, and can be upside down and whatnot. A lot of work went into that. Anyway, UI is essentially the aesthetic layer of your solution, while UX covers the entire experience of using your solution. Okay.
An anecdote about that bottle, the 57 on the glass bottle.
Uh-huh.
See that embossed in the glass above the label?
Yeah.
That's where you're supposed to hit the bottle to get the maximum flow of ketchup.
Oh, is that right? That's the target?
That's the
target. I just remember my dad with the ketchup bottle. Yeah. So moving on here. So following UX fundamentals can help in your efforts to deliver what your users actually need, while you avoid becoming a case study like the Tree with Swing project. So we're going to talk about 6 UX fundamentals. There are many more. But my presentation that included everything was a little too dense for one meeting. So we're going to cover 6 of the fundamentals. The first being empathy, which in the context of UX design means understanding the pain and experience of your users. And empathy is not limited to or by the stated problems. It includes the observed, the anticipated, and the unanticipated if possible. For example, in other words, it's an intellectual identification of the feelings, thoughts, attitudes of your users. I've also heard it described as gaining a 360 understanding or reframing of the problem. Remember, empathy leads to innovation. So if you understand what your users need more, you'll find yourself getting a little more creative. Now, the next is the iterative design thinking process, the 5-step process. Step 1, often referred to as the empathy step, is where you'll do your research and learn about the users and their needs. This is best accomplished by interviewing and speaking with actual end users. And a little point I want to make about that, when you're interviewing your users, record that interview. We bring a little tripod for our phones and set it up, explain to the users that you're recording your interview so that you can share it with your colleagues, your team, and so that you can refer back to it and not miss anything. So they know ahead of time that you're not like encroaching on their personal space or anything, but record those, they'll become real valuable. Number 2 empathizing with the users will enable you to better define the problem so that you can plan, which is step 2. Next, we ideate or design. I love the word ideate and ideation. They're just fun to say. Anyway, I'll also note that with each step in the design thinking process, you want to include communication and feedback loops with the customer so they know where you're at and what you've produced for them and how you're progressing. This will ensure that everyone's on the same page as the project proceeds, which of course is essential. After ideation comes prototyping, which will undoubtedly spark new ideas. And finally, we test. And here I'm not talking about the expected internal testing of your code that we do, our QA. This refers to usability testing by actual end users, preferably by actual end users. This will invariably spark new ideas for the project, teach you more about the users and their needs, and reveal insights that redefine the problem, which is why this is an iterative process, right? Whenever you go back to one, you're starting there and moving on again. The next fundamental is the UX hierarchy of needs. Now, this is organized much like Maslow's hierarchy of needs, but the UX version includes a combination of objective tasks and subjective experiences. Beginning with the most basic needs at the bottom, a solution must be functional, meaning it works as programmed. It must be reliable, as in it's available when needed. It can be used without difficulty. And then moving on to the more subjective experiences, it should be super easy to use. You've hit a home run if the user says, it works like I think. And all the better if it creates a memorable experience worth sharing. Perhaps it generates positive comments among coworkers when a new build is released. And finally, it has personal significance to those who use it. Our solutions needn't bring about, a spiritual experience, but be it elevated productivity, decreased frustration, or something else meaningful, they should have a positive impact on their users. Now, in a perfect world with perfect clients, endless budgets, and uninterrupted days on end, we would always achieve our goals and deliver the entire hierarchy with every project. Heck, I might even throw a bow on top if I could do that, But if you're out here in the real world like me, your best intentions and efforts can easily be thwarted by what we call the tyranny of the urgent. And so I'd like to take a brief moment to discuss a very important topic of how we prioritize and deliver on these needs. More likely than not, you found yourself in a situation like the following, myself included, where the functionality itself was so critical and the need so immediate that you delivered it in phases, beginning with the most essential. We got something that worked, it was reliable, and it was mostly usable, right? Then you improve on the solution when you have more time until you've eventually met your original goals, assuming they haven't changed since probably so much time has passed, right? Now, I assume that you're all familiar with the term MVP, as in minimally viable product, right? I want you to forget about that. Forget about what's minimally viable and focus instead on minimum value product. As in, what's the minimum value that you're willing to deliver with your name on it? If the minimum value that you're willing to deliver meets the entire hierarchy of needs, you're likely to deliver smaller increments of functionality at a time. But your users will be more satisfied with what they've received. And with smaller builds, you'll find yourself able to deliver more frequently. So if you shift your mindset to think in terms of minimum value product, you'll be able to deliver higher value to your users and with greater frequency. The 5 planes of UX is our next fundamental, and they build on each other from conception to completion. Our first plane is the strategy, where our efforts are both task and information oriented. This is where we identify both the product objectives and the user needs, which we can use to proceed to the second plane, which is scope, where we'll clarify the task-oriented functional specifications, information-oriented content requirements of the project. And with our project scope defined, we can now design the structure, which includes both the information architecture and the task-oriented interaction design objects within your schema. With our structure designed, we have what we need in order to advance to the skeleton, which is essentially the framework or mapping of how we intend to represent the information design, the interface design, and of course, our navigation design. Then and only then are we fully prepared for the fifth and final plane, which is the surface. This is where we apply the visual and sensory design. Now, the items shown in green are task-oriented, those in blue are information-oriented, and those in pink are both task and information-oriented. So you can see that if you're focused on the tasks, the user's tasks, you're going to be involved with several phases, likewise with information. They go a lot back and forth. And as you can see, each plane is fairly dependent and builds upon the completed planes below it, but requiring work on each plane to be finished before work on the next one can start, you'll find that's a bad idea. It leads to unsatisfactory results for both you and your users. It'll take a lot longer. So a better approach is to have work on each plane finish before the next can finish. So you can be simultaneously working on the different planes, but as soon as there's a change to a plane below, then you have to reevaluate the planes above it and the impact. So if there's a change in scope, obviously that's going to affect structure, skeleton, and the surface. If there's a change in structure, skeleton, and surface, and so on. So keep that in mind. And then, of course, you can be simultaneously working on multiples. Now, Yantu is my shorthand for the fundamental of you are not the user. And when I first shared this with the owners of Harmonic, they said, we want this on posters like all over the office for everyone to see and be reminded of. And they actually sell t-shirts and hats. You are not the user. We think that we're giving the client what they need, but are we really? We have to ask ourselves, have you ever been surprised, for example, to find that a user didn't know how to do something that you thought was obvious? Yep, it's real clear to you, this step, this step, this step, right? No problem. Oh, it's right there, no problem. And the user didn't get it. This is the result of the false consensus effect, which refers to people's tendency to assume that others share their beliefs and will behave similarly in a given context. So we tend to think that people share our choices, values, and judgments. So we perceive alternate responses as rare, sometimes even deviant. This, by the way, is just one of over 180 cognitive biases and one of several, there's like 21, 22 of them, something like that, that can actually impact our work as developers and designers. And I won't get into what all of those are, but we need to be aware of that and aware of also the Dunning-Kruger effect is another bias where someone thinks they know more than they actually do. And that can affect us as well. So therefore, seriously, you are not the user. And for some, this will represent a major mindset shift. VIM has to do with cognitive loading, specifically visual, intellectual, memory, and motor. So these account for 80% of usability issues. So reducing them should be a high priority. Reducing needless inconsistency and clutter will facilitate the user's ability to access the information and functionality that they need. And you want to reduce needless complexity. Remember, simple is better. And by simple, I mean simple for the user, which probably means more work for you, which can be good or bad. Did you know the average person makes 35,000 decisions a day? That's a lot. So you don't want to add anything unnecessary to their load. Memory load. involves short and long term. So where possible, reduce the need for required mental information storage. You want to strive for recognition over recall whenever possible. So common workflows are more easily remembered, but don't assume that your users will remember the details or the requirements for less frequent tasks or workflows, like say, reversing a deposit or running end of year reports. Also, and this is very important, don't use ambiguous icons that force the user to think in order to distinguish their meaning. And don't use the same icon for two different kinds of functionality. Where the user has to know that, well, here it does this, but over there it does that. That's memory load. Last is motor load. Oh, also remember that working with your app, as essential and wonderful as they may be, is only one among a plethora of things that your users are interacting with each day. So for motor load, you want to reduce inconsistencies in required behavior. So I'm going to give you an example, another real world example. This is the door to our conference room here at Harmonic. And if we look at the handle, you can see it's push-pull handles on both sides of the door. But because of this little thing, it only actually goes one way. It only pushes, but the handles suggest the same action on both sides. And the indicator for which side it is something that we have to remember, and we don't remember. And so we're always trying it one way and then doing it the right way, right? We rarely try the right way first, okay? So that's an example of motor load. So if users are needing to click something and find out that it was the wrong thing because they didn't understand what the right thing was or where the right thing was, that's motor load because of inconsistencies. Another good example of that would be, where do you put the close window button on a card? Do you always put it in the same location every time? That's something that becomes, kind of our muscle memory. And if we don't put it there, they're going there, and then they're having to move again. So that's motor load. So the rule of thumb for UX is more options equal more problems. Keep it simple. So quick recap. We want to embrace empathy, follow the iterative design thinking process with interactive communication ongoing with our clients. Keep in mind the UX hierarchy of needs and attempt as best we can to deliver as much of it with each build as we can. Keep the 5 planes of UX in mind and remember that when you are making a change at one plane, you may likely need to reevaluate all the planes above it. And Yawn 2, you are not the user. Plaster that everywhere. And of course, Vim. Now, in order to do this, you have to follow these. There's a little more involved with that, but I'd like to take a moment here first, congratulate you for listening to me drone on uninterrupted for quite a while here. I appreciate that. You've survived listening to me, and we've covered some of the basic fundamentals behind human-centered design thinking. Next, I'll share some of the tools and techniques used to implement the 5-stage UX process. Now, I'd love to share several things for each stage, but in the interest of time and mental load, I'll focus primarily on the planning and prototyping stages. First, I want to talk about user stories. Does anyone here use user stories? Anyone?
Yes.
Okay. Oh, good, great. Glad to hear it. So there are several variants, but the classic user story formula is as follows. As a who, I want or need what, so that why, right? It's real simple. The user story can also include acceptance or anti-specification criteria. As a role, I want a goal so that I get some benefit. And here's my criteria of acceptance, or as this says, conditions of satisfaction. Now, user stories are informal, natural language descriptions of features, and UI elements or tasks written from the perspective of the user. So in this example, I'm an account manager. I want a sales report sent to my inbox daily so that I can monitor sales progress. And I require that it be sent daily to my inbox, that it includes certain details, and that it's in CSV format. So it's not technical other than the CSV format, and I want it where I want it in my email inbox. So these are intended to get you talking and thinking about solutions in the context of end users and the benefits that they will receive. These conversations will also help everyone arrive at a shared understanding much faster than reading a requirements document. Now, the point of using stories written like this is to create a face-to-face conversation about what's needed from the end user perspective. Here's an example in Trello showing multiple user stories for the same app from one of my SMU group projects. And I'm not going to take the time to read all of them, but we were building an app for people who suffer from chronic pain. And this was an app to record pain levels, medication, treatments, etc. And so these were a variety of the different user stories that we wanted to satisfy within the app. Now, to avoid any confusion, I want to clarify that writing user stories as part of your planning process doesn't mean that you won't also employ use cases, which we're used to. Developers can and should rely on both, but understand that user need descriptions will differ between the two. So for example, user stories will have short descriptions versus use cases that may be short or quite lengthy. User stories will indicate the requirements who and why, while the use cases often will include user flows and interaction detail. User stories will provide general guidance versus use cases, which provide more in-depth guidance, and they can be quite detailed to write, while user stories don't include the technical detail and are intended to be, their very nature is that they're very short. Now, if you aren't an avid sketcher, like I am, not that I'm a good one, but if you're not an avid sketcher, I encourage you to step away from your technology during the planning stages to sketch out the workflows and map the user's experience. Now, sketches, like you can see here, don't need to be high quality to convey their meaning. I sometimes use a storyboard format to map functionality. This sample is mapping button bar functionality, and I only took part of it, so you're only seeing 2 buttons here called out. But I like the storyboard format because I can actually show that to a client and say, you know, so if you click this, you're going to see this, and then this is going to happen, right? And then I can get their buy-off on that process and that workflow before I actually code it. Now, especially with more complex systems, sketching your layouts before you build can be extremely helpful to you as the developer, but they also serve as wireframes that can be shared with customers. Unless you be concerned that your clients won't be impressed by sketches. And you can see this one here is pretty simple. I'd argue that it's been my experience that not only don't clients have a problem with sketches, but they're more likely to point out issues and additions when they're looking at a sketch or a simple wireframe. And this was reinforced by UX lessons that I've learned. There's a phenomenon, I don't know what it's actually called, but I refer to it as the prototype bias. Where the higher the quality or fidelity of your wireframes, the less likely a client is to call out their concerns. Consciously or not, clients equate quality with dollars spent. So they're less inclined to reject a less than optimal presentation because they feel like they've already paid for it. So lower quality can be good. I mean, it's not that you want them to be complaining about things, but you want them to call out concerns that they have, and you want that early. What is it? Somebody said, was it Amazon or somebody's mantra was, deliver fast and fail quickly or something like that. Do it when you're sketching, not after you've written the scripts. So here's an example where I did my sketches on an 11x17 light vellum to demonstrate the workflow to customers. We were actually able to overlay them so I didn't have to do as much sketching because stuff just showed through. I then used it as the basis for an interactive prototype. Now, in response to iterative feedback during the user testing, the original workflow, which included 6 steps, evolved through the iterative process into just 4 steps. So in case anyone's unsure of the differences, because I've used some of these terms, I'd like to explain, this is a wireframe. It's literally a sketch. Now, your sketch doesn't have to be like done with a writing instrument. It can be done electronically or digitally, but a wireframe should look like a wireframe. This is a mock-up. Now, it's intentionally vague in some of its detail and it's low fidelity, but it gives the user, a closer idea of the look and the direction you're going with the UI. And then a prototype is actually an interactive mock-up. And it can be low fidelity or high fidelity. And I want to call out, because of the image I've used here, an example that was shared with me about a project where one of my professors was delivering, and they had a photo of the hotel that the app was going to be used by. And the client got really hung up on the photo because they didn't want the photo to be from that angle, from that side of the building. And that's not the purpose of the prototype. That's after. The prototype is not intended to show actual images, things like that. So you want to be very careful about what you use in your prototypes so that you don't provide them with something that will distract them from the purpose of the prototype, which is to test the functionality and make sure that your workflows work as intended. So I'm going to share an example of these 3 steps, the sketch, the wireframe, and the prototype, from my group project at SMU for building our mobile app called Spork. This was the sketch phase, literally just sketches. Entire team did their sketches and put them all on the same board, and then we went from there. Then our wireframes. And your wireframes, you may find that they'll work for your mockups as well, or you may do separate mockups. And then the prototype, which is interactive. So this prototype, again, was for users who suffer from chronic pain. So we allow them to record their pain, and we did a daily check-in as well. So we'll take a look at the daily check-in. I'm going to say how much sleep I got, move on. What was my mood? Now that was actually supposed to be a drag, but the prototype tool didn't have the drag in a circle option. Low energy, move along. So yeah, I had a lot of fast food. You can see it drags, and this is not connected to FileMaker. This is in another program that basically is like a drawing program or a page layout program almost, but we can make it interactive like this. This was done using XD, Adobe XD, as was the next prototype here of a report dashboard. So you can see that's got the scrolling in it that's interactive. The actual data that's shown here is obviously bogus, but this is intended to show the functionality and the workflow.
I have a question, if you don't mind.
Yes.
When
No,
when you're doing your prototypes, do you find by the time you've built the interactivity you need, you've got a good portion of your functionality done?
Yeah, depending on how you build the prototype, right? What tool are you using to build your prototype? How many of us here have used FileMaker to build mockups? or prototypes, right? I did an entire presentation for the state of South Carolina on a mock-up database, right? It had no real functionality. It was meant to behave as though it did, right? Because FileMaker is so quick and easy to use. But what I have found is that the time spent doing an actual prototype where you're not in FileMaker, your thinking is about the workflow and the functionality, not what script you're going to attach to the button, what schema do I need to show something in this portal. You're not thinking about any of the code. You're not thinking about how it's going to be built. You're thinking about what it needs to accomplish, what it needs to present, and what it needs to accomplish. So it is a different mindset. And I found that these don't take very long to do, because by the time I get to this point, I already have a pretty good idea of what I have in mind. And Adobe XD allows you to do things like, for example, this panel that we're looking at right here, and I don't know how to do a drawer thing to point, but this panel of multiple stores here, I built one, and then I was able to turn it into a group that I was able to just slide to the right and create 5 more, right? And these scroll, and I did not show that in the demo, but they scroll side to side. You know, they're in a carousel, and you can demonstrate that kind of functionality in a prototype without having to actually build any code. I also go old school for a lot of my work. You know, I started drafting in 7th grade, then architecture in high school. I think if I weren't a developer, I'd have been an architect. If I had the stomach for the school. Anyway, so I brought my tools with me to pause, and several people were very interested in them, so I'm going to share them with you here as well. First, of course, are my stainless steel stencils for wireframing. As I said, your sketches don't need to be good, but if I'm doing something where I want to represent, you know, an icon that's easily recognized, I kind of like it to look like it should. So everything that I'm going to show you here is on Amazon, and there aren't many of these web or UX stencils, but these 3 come as a set together, and they're the best ones I've found. I also have a nice collection of French curves and circle templates. You'd be surprised how often you end up using those when you're designing workflows and some of your wireframes. I also love these little small metal rulers. They fit in a pocket or a purse, satchel, and I like them because they've got this scale on them. And so I can actually I can make my sketches just a little closer to scale. I like to do color a lot. So I love these erasable color pens. I just discovered them like last January. I don't know how I got through life without erasable pens before. Well, actually I do. I always had pencil. I always wrote in pencil. I also love the Rocketbooks dot grid. And they also have erasable note cards, and those are very handy as well. Here are a few of the UX references that are currently on my bookshelf. We have sketching user experiences, card sorting, designing usable categories. You'd be surprised how difficult it can be. Well, no, you wouldn't be surprised by this at all. It can be really difficult to reorganize an existing system, right? So you've got navigation that has 20 options when really they need 4. Right? Card sorting is a tool. It kind of looks like kindergarten work, right? A kindergarten project with note cards on a table, but you would be surprised how such a simple task, a simple exercise can help you to rethink an entire group of information. So that's a handy book. Handbook of usability testing. How to plan, design, and conduct effective tests. That's very useful. Interviewing users. This one, how to uncover compelling insights. It's a short read, It's probably only 100 and some odd pages. It's like a 1 to 2 hour read. It's incredibly insightful and very helpful for that phase where you get a chance to speak with your users and how to make sure you're getting good feedback from them, that they're comfortable and that you're not influencing what they're sharing with you. That's real important. User story mapping. Discover the whole story so you can build the right product. And that's really the goal. If you understand the users well enough, understand their needs well enough and their whole experience with your product, then you can build the right product. The design studio method, and a call out to Brian Sullivan, who was one of my professors at SMU. Visual intelligence, sharpen your perception, change your life. I did not classify this under any particular category because it's a little bit broad, but it's a great book and you'll find it interesting in your design work. Think like a UX researcher, learning how to observe users, influence design, shape business strategy. This covers a lot of ground and also not a long read. It's a fairly short book, but very impactful. Data story, explaining data and inspiring action through story. This is a fun book by Nancy Duarte, who also has a great book called Slideology about presentations. And that's fascinating. If anyone gives a lot of presentations, I highly recommend her Slideology book in addition to Data Story. Designing with the mind in mind, simple guide to understanding user interface design rules, very handy in the prototyping phase. And that covers things like the heuristics, which I did not get into. Designing for emotion. This is got another fairly short read, very impactful though. And the design thinking toolbox. This is an incredibly fun guide to mastering the most popular and valuable innovation methods. And it's just full of all kinds of exercises that you and your team can use to increase creativity, to gain more insight with your users. It's just a really fun book. But if I had to prioritize and give you the top 3, because some of these books aren't cheap. Some are, some aren't. Anyway, I would recommend you start with interviewing users, how to uncover compelling insights. Think like a researcher, and designing for emotion. Those, I think, are the best starting points out of all of these books. And I have many more, but, you know, again, you're not here to learn about my library. So I've shown a few areas that I think require a change in perspective for some. I know they did for me, but the takeaway that I want to leave you with today is this. As developers, our first inclination, well, if you're like me, first inclination is when we listen to our clients describing their wants and needs, is to think about how we can solve their problems and improve their lives. And that's not a bad thing, but we tend to focus more on the what and the how, and often losing sight of the why and for whom. But a UX mindset focuses on who we're building for and why in order to identify the what. So I want to thank you for joining me.
Thanks, Heather. Anybody have any questions?
I'm sorry?
Anybody have any questions for you, Heather? Okay, well, let me make a couple comments, having gone the architect route before coming to FileMaker.
I'd love to hear that.
Yeah, you know, there's so many parallels between design for the real world and designing software. It's uncanny. In fact, you use an architectural example in your slides of a problem with the door and everything.
Yeah.
A couple of books that you may or may not be aware of that were used back in the day when I was learning how to design. One is called Problem Seeking by William Pena, and it's all about architectural programming. And architectural programming is not the kind of programming that we do. It's basically determining all the things you need to know before you start designing the building.
Yeah, yeah, for sure.
Another one that's been mentioned in the community before, I don't know when, some other presentation, is a pattern language by Christopher Alexander.
Mhm.
And it's basically a book of several hundred patterns that you see over and over again in architecture that solve basic problems. And I know we have patterns in the design field as well to solve specific types of problems. So anyway, I thought you might find, maybe not for everybody, but maybe for your library, since your library is so extensive.
Yeah, actually, that reminds me of something. I'm going to be right back in about 5 seconds. Hang on. It's right around the corner here. I'm going to grab something. I found this online. If any of you use OmniGraffle, there's a lot of templates and stencils and things that you can get for those. But there's there's one that has all these wireframes objects, and I found a set. They come in a little box. This is the UX kit, and it's full of cards that have. Sorry, let me get it in front of the camera. That have all kinds of different patterns on them that we would use in our design, and they have like low fidelity version, map, and a high fidelity version. So we can literally sit at a table and spread these out and do our workflow and design. Now, there are 2 versions. There's the wireframe deck for web, and then just let's see, this is the website version and the wireframe version. And sorry, get it close to the camera. I keep wanting to put them in front of the image I see instead of the camera. But these are available from a place called UX Kits.
Oh, interesting.
And I love those. I love the patterns. I'd love to have a book of common design patterns for software, because there's so much that we use and reuse, but even within our own office, we have patterns that have been used on one project, but another developer wasn't involved on that project, so they're unaware of it, right? So that's one of my objectives. One of my goals here in my new role is to start, collecting this information as part of our design library.
Yeah, it's a great idea. I mean, you should check out a pattern language if you haven't seen it before. It's an old architectural book. It's been around for 50 years. But they went to the trouble of cataloging all kinds of architectural design patterns that you see in the built environment. Something similar to that.
No, I wrote them down. I got problem seeking and a pattern language. I will look those up for sure.
I'll second the pattern language. I think it was, I maybe heard about it from Albert originally, and I read it, and it was, very, very interesting.
Yeah, I attended Albert's, I forget what it's called, symposium, design symposium
Masterclass
ago up in Boston. It was great. He had an example of a door that had no handles. Like you didn't know which side to push. I think it had a panel that covered both sides, right? And so you're coming at the door, you have no idea which side to push.
Right.
And I loved his real world examples of bad UI. Though it wasn't called UX then. Right. Because I've been around a long time. That was a long time ago, but probably 20 years ago. But anyway, yeah, I love, I think being able to use those real world examples are very helpful.
Yeah, one of my favorite things to do as an architect is to critique all my other architectural colleagues' work, basically when I'm going through buildings, going, oh, that doesn't work very well. And designing buildings is very complicated. It's like designing a very complex piece of software. And, there's so much wrong with signage and all kinds of stuff in buildings. It's terrible.
So I have a drawing at home that I found in my grandparents' things that came to me after they passed away. And as much as a child, I thought growing up, I thought I wanted to be a veterinarian, like a lot of kids do. Yet what I did when I was doodling was I drew the floor plans for my veterinary hospital. And that should have been a clue. I wasn't really meant to be a veterinarian. I was meant to design something.
Right. One of the things that we did as a sort of an exercise in class in architectural school is you either had to go around campus with crutches or in a wheelchair for a day to see how people with disabilities have to navigate the world.
Yeah. I had surgery on my left Achilles tendon 4 years ago, and I had to spend a month in a wheelchair and then a month with a walker and then about 6 months with crutches and a cane in physical therapy. And boy, I learned a lot about, you know, the way doors open or don't. And, you know, we've moved to a new space. Our team, the design and documentation team here at Harmonic Studios, there wasn't room for us in our existing office because we've gotten so big. And so we took an additional space, you know, about 15 feet down the hall. And the door to our space has the key lock down at the floor level because it's a glass door. I'm having the same surgery next week on my right foot, and we'll go through the same experience of being in a wheelchair. I won't be able to unlock the door.
Right.
Because I won't be able to reach it. So, and I haven't found a tool that will insert a key and turn it from a stick or something like that. So I'm going to have to make sure that, you know, the time that I am in or leaving the office, I can't be the first one in or the last one out anymore.
Right.
At least for a month. So yeah, those things, having to experience them. I know they do exercises like that, you know, blindfolding college students and things like that so they can experience what that's like. There's a real interesting UX story. Oh, I wish I could remember where it was and I could refer you to it because it was one of my reading homework assignments. There was an article written about the introduction of wheelchair ramps on sidewalks and, you know, for public access, and the effort that went into that, went into gaining that, as you know, to get the ADA passed and all of that. But what they learned is that once they provided the access for wheelchairs, there were lots of other uses for it. You had people with strollers and people on skateboards, and, you know, there were all kinds of other uses and advantages that came from providing that usability for the disabled. And they really weren't thinking about all the other benefits that would be gained by providing that handicapped access.
Right. That's true. Very true.
Yeah.
One of the most interesting seminars that I saw or witnessed, and this is to renew my architectural license, was a presentation given by a blind architect. And I'm going, how can you be blind and be an architect? And he was reading all his plans and everything in Braille. And then, but then when he would walk along the street or be in the built environment, you know, he'd be tapping his cane, and he could tell there were indentations in the building and obstructions and so on, just because of the audio feedback.
One of the courses I took was in accessibility design. And one of the speakers we had was actually the sister of the professor who's deaf. And she is an expert in interaction design for the disabled. And I was really surprised to learn how many things have to have accommodations that I never thought about before. And it turns out that if you're building anything that is government related, all government, anything paid for by the government has to meet the accessibility requirements.
Right.
And like we do work for government subcontractors. And so that made me wonder, you know, we need to check with our client and see, is this something that's covered by that? Because accessibility isn't something we took into account when we built the system.
Right. Well, do you have anything else you'd like to go back and review, or anything else you want to tell us? We have lots of time left.
I have one story I'd like to share, and that is based on a TED Talk that I saw, and it was an amazing experience. I will have to get back to you and share with you the link for this presentation. The individual who did the TED Talk was a designer of equipment, and he designed MRI machines. And so he tells this story about how he's at a hospital who's just had an installation of his machine, his new MRI machine, and he's very excited. He wants to see it in action. And so he goes to the MRI room, and the technician is there, and she tells him that he's going to need to leave because they've got a patient coming in for an MRI. And so he'll have to leave the room until they come in, and then he can come back. And so he leaves the room, and he looks down the hall, and he sees a family, mother and a father and a child, 6, 7 years old. And everyone is upset. You know, you can see through the body language, they're afraid, and the kid is upset. He's crying, and they're kind of dragging him down the hall, you know, to have this done. And it's very scary because kids don't get MRIs very often. So it's usually something pretty serious, right? And so this family is concerned and tense, and they go into the MRI room, and the kid has to be sedated to do the MRI. This is scary. And this is something that the designer of the machine never thought about. He thought about the machine and usability by the technician, you know, functionality for the technician. He wasn't thinking about the real user is the patient.
Right.
And after they left, he had to do a lot of hard thinking. And he looked at that room, and it's scary. It's this white room with warning signs and these sterile cabinets and bright lights. And it's kind of terrifying from the perspective of a child.
Mm-hmm.
And so he went back home. I don't know where this was installed, but he's up in like Minnesota area. And so he went home, and he has a friend that works at Children's Library. And so he put together some user groups of children and had them draw their experiences that they would enjoy. And then he went back to the hospital, and he made a bold proposal to redesign the machine. I mean, we're talking about an expensive machine, right?
Sure. Yeah.
So then he showed us the redesign, and the hallway leading to the MRI room has pebbles and stepstones on the way into the room. And he sees this family, watches basically the same experience, another family coming. But when they walk towards the room, the kid starts jumping on the stones, you know, step here, step there, and going, Dad, you're not stepping on the right stone, you know, and it's a game, right? Well, the stones lead into the MRI room, which is no longer sterile white and bright lights. It has the aroma of a babbling brook. And the stepping stones lead to a creek that leads to the machine. The machine has not been physically altered, but it has been reskinned, and it looks like a canoe. So the bed, or the flat surface you lay on, looks like a canoe now. And they tell the kid, you know, they're going to go get in the canoe. And if they hold real still, the fish will jump over them. And they put fish on the ring. They just painted fish on the ring that spins around. And I don't remember the exact percentage of children that have to be sedated in order to have an MRI, but it was high. I mean, like 60 to 80% of kids had to be sedated to do the MRI. After, I believe it was a year, over a period of a year, they had to sedate 2 children.
Oh, that's a good improvement.
That was a phenomenal improvement. And then he shared pictures of different ones. So the first one was the canoe on the brook, and the whole room, it had like trees painted, and, it looked like they were in the woods. And then he showed us another one that was a summer camp. And so it looked like they were going into a cabin, I think. And then where the technician is behind the wall was the counselor's cabin. I mean, the whole place was decked out. Right? And I believe one of them smelled like pina coladas, because of the way the room was designed. But they added aroma, lighting, and paint and changed the entire user experience. Functionality didn't change a bit.
It's a great story.
It really was. And it was one where, like, I didn't think that taking these classes was going to make me cry, but this story really did. So I'll have to get back to you and share the link to the story.
Sure.
It was a really good one. It made me feel really good about what I was learning.
Okay. Well,
does anyone else have questions?
Yeah,
Heather, I'd like to contribute. I found your story about the MRI and pediatric treatment really compelling, because I work at a pediatric hospital. But before I worked for sick kids, my first interaction with them was developing an ophthalmology surgery FileMaker database. And the surgeon said, okay, you're coming into the operating room. You are going to look at our conditions when we are entering in data. And you will get an appreciation for, how we have to deal with the conditions that we have to deal with this. So so there's absolutely nothing like looking at the environment really closely. And and thank you again. And it was a great presentation. I enjoyed it.
Thank you. Thank you. I had a similar experience. I mean, we now try to, as much as possible, actually visit the site, talk to actual users. One of our clients, excuse me, the one I showed the vellum sketches for in the wireframe, they deal in cotton. And so they have a cotton gin. And we actually went out to Lubbock, Texas, and toured the cotton gin to see the actual process and the environment that the users are working in. So we were thinking initially, one of the solutions we were thinking of had to do with, iPads or iPhones, something like that, a mobile device of some sort. But then we watched them, and these guys are wearing big, thick leather gloves. Well, that's not going to work. So,
that's funny. Yeah.
And I had another client over a decade ago now. They ran summer camps. It was a charity. They ran summer camps in Zambia. And we were building a FileMaker solution that part of what it would do, would keep track of the kids. And when the kids show up, they get assigned to a group leader. And, so the app had to, put them in groups, kind of like on the certification exam where you've got the classes and the students, so very, fairly simple organization that had to happen. But the director insisted that I needed to go to Zambia and see them. I needed to see when the kids arrive at camp and what their environment is. Well, okay. If I must, who thought that FileMaker was going to take me to Zambia? Anyway, so I spent a week there at camp with kids. And when they arrive on buses where, a bus that holds 30 kids with 60, 70 kids on it, and they are hanging out the windows and they're singing. You can hear them coming down the road. Everything is dusty. We had to have these like super industrial strength, like combat strength laptops there that we were using because of all the dust. But anyway, they come in and it all happens so fast. These hundreds of children arrive and end up in their groups in a period of about 10 minutes or less. So everything we thought about how our workflow was going to work and what we had to do was like out the window, because we had to work with that environment, and seeing it meant everything, And I got to go to Zambia. So.
Wow, that's another great story. If nobody else has any other questions, thank you, Heather. That was a wonderful presentation, very insightful. Hopefully we'll get a chance to chat at some point in the future about the crossover between architecture and the real world and software design.
Yes, I love that. There's so much of a connection with musicians and FileMaker, and I am not a musician. I took 4 years of piano and I can't play anything, so I'd love to have some other connection with FileMaker and other developers.
Okay, with that, I'm going to stop recording. That'll bring us to the end of our December meeting. Hope to see you all back here in January 13th, 2023.
Thank you, Barry, for all your service.